What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. Today we're going to be going over the Magicka Templar DPS. The Magplar has pretty much stayed more or less where it has been relative to other classes for the most part. Of course, Sorks have kind of pushed ahead, Necromancers are also ahead, Nightblades are also ahead. So I guess in terms of where Magplars stand now, they're probably third in line, tied up with maybe the Magsork in terms of overall DPS. The main thing that really hit Magplars was the sustain changes to all the dots that they have to run. And so that in turn has pretty much brought Magplar sustain down to being one of the less sustainable Magicka DPS classes if you're aiming to use a light attack build. As you can see already from our bars here, we will be taking use of Spell Symmetry under the Mage's Guild line in order to fully sustain the light attack rotation. And this is with Parse food as well, so this is sort of mimicking real raid scenario with real raid sustain with things like Holofang or Worm. We're already getting Worm actually from the trial dummy, but things like Holofang, Symphony, etc. And even with this, it's a little bit difficult to sustain a full light attack rotation. So that's one of the things that has kind of inched down Magplar DPS a little bit, at least compared to some other classes. Generally speaking, though, Radiant Oppression J-Beam is still just as strong as it used to be. And so Magplars are still definitely strong. Not quite as strong compared to Nightblades and Necromancers. Probably a little bit even with Sorks here. Perhaps a hair stronger than Sorks. Just because you don't have to rely on any pets. So any sort of pet AI weirdness, it's really not going to affect Magplars. But the downside is you will have quite a bit of at least compared to a Sork, you have probably around the same sustain or maybe even worse sustain than a Sork. Just like the rest of our build videos though, we will not be going over any gear options. So if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear I'm running here, please feel free to pause this video and go click on the video that should be popping up in the upper right hand corner. That will get you to the Magicka DPS gear video, which will go over all your gear options to run as a Magicka DPS. So on this particular video, we'll be going over skills, the rotation, and the 21mm Parse. You guys get an idea of where Magplars stand in relation to other Magicka DPS that I run. Now, one thing I also will mention in this video is we will be going over CP setups, because CPs here are going to be a little bit different for Magplars compared to some other Magicka DPS. We are still using 75 in the Thaumaturge, but for other Magicka classes, we will not actually be running that many points in the Thaumaturge anymore. So Magplars are kind of a unique case here. So let's go ahead and get started here with skills. So Magplars don't really have a lot of flexibility when it comes to their skills. So that's one of the downsides of running a Magplar. You don't have a lot of flex spots here. So for our front bar, we have Elemental Weapon as a spammable. You can also use Force Pulse. I tried using sweeps, the spammable sweeps, I just say Puncturing Sweep, not Crescent Sweep here, as a spammable, and I found it to be lacking. I'm still maybe pulling 2 to 3k shy of what I'm able to pull with Elemental Weapon and Force Pulse, so I don't personally recommend running Puncturing Sweep outside of maybe for trash fights, just because Puncturing Sweep has a better AoE potential than Elemental Weapon and Force Pulse. Next we have Purifying Light, so the Reflection can crit now, so it actually is worth running Purifying Light now. Then we have Radiant Oppression, J-Beam, or Execute. Blazing Spear. We need to have this on our front bar here, just because we do need to maintain the Piercing Spear passive, which gives us the additional crit damage. We also want to maintain it in order to continue to proc our Burning Light procs, because we are not using Puncturing Sweeps. Inner Light, then Shooting Star. On our back bar, we have Spell Symmetry. This is to help sustain. We pretty much have to run it. In a raid, it's going to be very tight. You're going to be incredibly... I won't say it's going to be very difficult to sustain if you have full support. So you have Holofang, Worm, and Symphony of Blades, but it's definitely tight. It's pretty similar to Sorks, if not a little bit worse than Sork sustain. You have Solar Barrage. So the damage coming from Solar Barrage is actually not that great compared to some other dots you could be running, but you want to run Solar Barrage for the Empower that it grants you. So you definitely want to make sure to keep Solar Barrage going in order to get that basically infinite Empower. Basically, Magplars have a permanent 40% buff to your light attack damage because of this ability. And then we have Unstable Wall. You can also use Blockade as well. Blockade will give you a little bit better sustain at the cost of a little bit of DPS. We have Channeled Focus for Sustain. It also gives us Major Resolve, so we get a little bit more survivability compared to some other classes that might not have a source of Major Resolve. We have Barbed Trap for Minor Force. You do need to be within melee range to use Barbed Trap, so if you can't be within melee range, you should be using Channel Acceleration under the Sigil Order line. But if you don't have access to the Sigil Order line, then you're going to want to run the other morph of Barbed Trap, which is Lightweight Beast Trap instead. And our ultimate is going to be Crescent Sweep. You can swap this out with another ultimate if you'd like the Destro Staff ultimate, or even just double bar Shooting Star. I've had better DPS running Crescent Sweep though, compared to just running Shooting Star or the Destro ulti. Now, in terms of flex spots, there really is only one spot on each bar: the Inner Light on the front bar, and Spell Sim on the back bar. And that's really it. You really need all the other skills here. Each of them have their place. You have Spamble, Purifying Light is really strong now. Radiant Oppression, obviously, for your execute. You want Blazing Spear for the Burning Light proc. You want to have Solar Barrage for the Empower, Blockade or Unstable for Maelstrom bonus. You want to sustain from Channel Focus. You need a Minor Force. So the only real flex spots are Spell Sim and Inner Light. So in terms of other abilities, if you need a shield, you can run Radiant Ward, but there are stronger shields, namely the Light Arbor Shield, actually, with either Harness Magicka or Dampen Magic, because this scales off of your Magicka, while Radiant Ward scales off of your health, so not quite as strong here. Let's see here. Vamp Bane for another single target move. This is actually pretty weak now, so it's not usually worth running. Reflective Light, on the other hand, might be worth running for trash fights because it does give you a little bit of cleave. But generally speaking, it's not really worth running any longer. Solar Prison is an ultimate that you might want to run just for the major maim it provides. Some progression groups want to have that major maim for high damage scenarios, like Execute in Hall's Fabrication against the Assembly General. Under Restoring Light here, not much here. You can run Ritual Retribution, which will deal some damage, as well as heal and provides the Purify synergy, so pretty loaded when it comes to the overall utility of Ritual Retribution, but it is very expensive to use. You can see here 4,000, a little bit over 4,000 Magicka, and the actual damage it deals is actually not that great. It's a little bit better than some other single target dots, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't stand above any other single target dot, really. Let's see here. Crushing Shock for a ranged interrupt if you need it. It's always nice to have that option there. So if you are running Elemental Weapon as your spamble, you might want to just have Crushing Shock as a alternative, just in case you need to range interrupt, for example, Asylum Hard Mode. Let's see what else here. Already talked about Light Armor, your shields, pick whichever one you want, depending on which bonus you'd like. Soul Splitting Trap for more cleave if you need it. Consuming Trap for the single target, but if you're going for a single target, you're probably better off just running Ritual Retribution. Although it is more expensive, it does deal a little bit more damage than Consuming Trap does. So there's that. Nothing much other fighter skill. Major skill line. Generation if you want to source a major sorcery, but you should be getting that from Spell Power Potions. The dot itself, I mean, it's damage, but the other abilities that you have on your bars provide not just damage, but also some sort of like buff or utility to you, so usually not worth running Degeneration here. We already talked about Channel Acceleration, Undaunted, Mystic Orb, which is a pretty decent move. It's a little bit expensive, so you can see here 3250 Magicka, so a little bit expensive to use. But it is pretty strong, especially in trash fights and against bosses with very large hitboxes. You can get a lot of damage out of Mystic Orb, so definitely a ability you might want to consider running here. But again, you're giving up either Inner Light or Spell Sim in order to get this, so kind of up to you if you want to make that sacrifice or not. But that's pretty much all the potential options for skills. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the rotation. So the rotation, as you can imagine, just judging from our bars here, is going to be dynamic. So while some of the abilities they line up pretty decently well, Unstable, Solar Barrage, Spear, they're all 10 seconds. Purifying Light is 6 seconds, and Barb Trap is 18, and Challenge Focus is 20 seconds. So a little bit offsets here and there. Usually you'll be able to get Spear, Blockade, and Solar Barrage all kind of grouped together into one go. But Barb Trap, Purifying Light are definitely going to be out of that sort of static rotation, so it's a little bit dynamic there in that regard. The other thing that kind of makes it dynamic, the fact that you want Purifying Light to run completely out. So you can see here that you do get some copy damage, and again, it does crit, so you want to make sure to get that copy damage going. But if you were to cast it early, recast it early, so let's say you only let it go for 4 seconds, 5 seconds maybe, and you then recast it, you don't get a second hit, so you have to let it run completely out. So you do need to wait the full 6 seconds or more in order to use Purifying Light again. That's one thing that kind of keeps things a little bit, keeps you on your toes a little bit. In terms of which dot you want to prioritize, Solar Barrage and Unstable Wall and Blazing Spear. Those are the three you want to maintain. Solar Barrage for the Empower, Unstable Wall for your Maelstrom Staff bonus, and then Blazing Spear for the Burning Light procs. Try to keep up Channel Focus if you can for the additional Magicka regen, but if you're running Spell Sim, you might not necessarily need to keep it up all 100% of the time. It definitely does help, though, to try to maintain as best you can. And then Barb Trap is also really important for the Minor Force, which is a really strong dot here. So if you need to let any dot drop, Purifying Light is the one that you want to drop. Now when you get into Execute, Execute phase is a little bit different for Templars, just because of the way Radiant Depression scales. You can see here scales up to 480% more damage to enemies below 50% health. Plus you get some additional damage in proportion to your current Magicka. So generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to keep using a spammable up until around maybe like 33% or so. Once you hit about 33%, you're going to want to stop using a spammable and start using J-Beam instead. When you get to about 25% or so, you're going to want to basically drop all of your dots except for Unstable Wall / Blockade, Blazing Spear, and Rearming Trap. So you're only running those 3 dots. So you're dropping Solar Barrage, you're dropping Purifying Light, and then you're just going straight into J-Beam from there. And then once you get to roughly 12 to 10% health remaining, that's when you're just going to want to drop all of your dots except for the Minor Force, whatever your source of Minor Force is, and just do straight up J-Beam the whole time. There is an add-on to help with it, How to Beam, but it is a little bit outdated just because the values for the dots that it tracks have kind of gone all over the place. They were all nerfed in Dragonhold, so the values that you see there are probably not accurate any longer. So the last thing I want to mention before we start going over rotation is our CPs. So I mentioned earlier that Magplars want 75 points in the Thaumaturge, and that's just because a lot of our damage comes from damage over time. Radiant Depression also scales off of Thaumaturge because it is considered a damage over time ability. So we still want to have 75 in the Thaumaturge because we also want the Exploiter passive as well. But as for our other CP nodes here, I'm going to change a couple of these here. So we're actually going to drop Mastered Arms down to 52 and drop Elfborn down to 56. Bump up Spell Erosion up to 10, and we'll take Staff Expert up to 13. That's the blue CPs here for Magplar. So 75 Thome, 52 Mastered Arms, 13 Staff Expert, 56 Elfborn, 64 Ellie Expert, 10 Spell Erosion. Alright, now we can go ahead and talk about the rotation here. So you always want to start off with making sure you have Challenge Focus. You can move out of the rune and you'll still maintain the additional Magicka regen, so it's not imperative that you stay in it. The only benefit you get from it is you get a little bit more resistances. Make sure to start Channel Rune, start off with whatever your source of Minor Force is. Then keep an eye on Purifying Light here. Remember, you want to use Purifying Light when it runs out, not before. You can see here that we're trying to keep Blockade and trying to keep the 3 10-second dots kind of lined up together. And you can see here Motor out of Magicka. Really sucky sustain on Magicka Templars. So you will want to use Spell Sim in order to get some Magicka back. Now the good thing is you are using Purifying Light. So if you're within melee range, you will be getting the heal from Purifying Light. If you're in a raid, you have healers. They should be able to heal you up pretty much right away from after using Spell Sim. So that shouldn't be that big of an issue there. So try to use Spell Sim only when it's necessary that you feel you need additional Magicka to sustain. So it returns 3,000 Magicka to you. So I usually start using it when I start dropping below maybe like 40% Magicka and I don't have a potion, I don't have an orb or shard coming up anytime soon. That's generally when I start to use Spell Sim, and I usually just use it once, then I go to my front bar, and then when I go back to reapply my Unstable Wall and Solar Barrage, then I use Spell Sim again if I still need it, and so on and so forth. And again, once we get into Execute, you pretty much want to drop, starting at 33%, because again, Execute's a little bit weird for Templars compared to other classes. 33%, stop spammable, use your J-Beam. 25% to about 12% or so, drop Purifying Light, Solar Barrage, use J-Beam, and at 12% onward, you drop all your dots except for whatever your source amount of force is, and then do J-Beam. So it's probably better just to show you the 20 dummy parse, just so you guys can get an idea of what the rotation looks like. So again, dynamic, and I will try to narrate throughout the parse so you guys can get an idea of what's going on. So I am opening with Shooting Star here. That's perfectly fine to do. Again, trying to keep the 10-second dots sort of tied together here. So for Solar Barrage, because the dot damage itself is not that great, our main point of using Solar Barrage is for the Empower, so we just want to make sure that never drops off. So it's okay to overcast that ability. What you can't overcast is going to be Purifying Light, because like I mentioned, if you recast it too early, you will not be able to get that reflected damage, which is really important. Oh, that's weird. Did not throw out my shard. Now, unlike Power of the Light, you don't get a nice audio cue for when your Power of the Light second hit happens. You will need to use some sort of dot tracker. Keep track of Purifying Light. That synergy messed up my shard cast again. Well. Gonna use Spell Sim there. I prefer to play it a little bit safer with my max Magicka. With Spell Sim here. One thing I also like to do with Spell Sim and my max Magicka is I try to go into Execute. So again, that starts around 33 for Magpliers. A little more Magicka than I normally would, just because of the way J-Beam scales. I'm probably going to use Spell Sim here too, just because I don't have a shard coming up soon. We're getting close to about Execute range. You should start seeing... Yep, there it is. That's how to beam. So instead of using my spam wall now, I'm just going to use J-Beam. But I am going to try to maintain all of my dots. Now I am going to drop all my dots except for Blade, Spear and Wall, and Barbed Trap. It's up to you if you want to keep up channel focus or not. So at this point, it's just going to be straight up J-Beam the whole time. See if we can kill it before Barbed Trap runs out. Probably not, but we're going to try. Nope, not going to work. Oh well. Oh, just barely managed to make it. Alright, cool. So that is the Magicka Templar rotation there. So you can see execute was a little bit weird there. So again, the cutoffs are 33, 25, and around 12 to 10-ish. But here is the Parse. We pulled a little shy of 81.1k. So again, pretty comparable to Magicka Sorcerers, a little bit less than Necromancers and Nightblades in general in raids. You can see here, Vein Depression, huge damage, enormous damage. Max tick here was a 105, so definitely something that's really strong. And the Burning Light proc that I mentioned earlier from the Blazing Spear passive, or Blazing Spear ability, is pretty strong. It actually does more than the Blazing Spear dot does, and almost as much DPS as Blazing Spear combined. So the dot and a direct damage component does. So really strong proc here. Just want to make sure to get that up as much as we can. I can see Purifying Light, now that it crits, is really strong. Pretty strong indeed. It does almost as much DPS as our actual Spammable does. So really important that we do not overcast Purifying Light so we get those second hits and get those massive crits. Well, that concludes this build video. If you guys have any questions about the build, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. Hope you guys found it sweet and informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.